All right, welcome everybody. You guys having a good time so far, guys and gals? Yeah? All right, cool. My name's Dusty Dory. I work for Jamf Software. I'm in the education department. I'm actually seeing a lot of familiar faces, so that's awesome. I think I've had a good number of folks in certification courses and stuff. So thanks for coming back despite that, after having to deal with me for a week already. So what's going on right now is I'm going to do an intro. All right, I'm not going to be the one talking for the next hour, so you luck out on that one. But before we get going too far on this, what I want to know is just a real quick breakdown on where you guys are coming from, what spaces are you in. So can I get a show of hands? Who's in K-12? Awesome. All right, cool. How about higher ed? Cool. And then corporate enterprise? No. Government? Okay, all right. Oh yeah. Right. Non-essential. All right, cool. All right, that helps us kind of know what our audience is. All right, cool. Well, thank you guys for showing up. All right, so on to the speaker. The gentleman that's going to be giving the presentation, I had the pleasure of having in one of the courses, and got to know Joe a couple years ago. Year and a half. And Joe was coming in. He already had a bunch of experience with iOS devices, but he still sat there nicely and listened to me talk about it. And after that, I was able to kind of keep in touch with Joe a little bit, kind of see the progress throughout the next year and a half. And Joe's done some really cool stuff with his iOS deployment. One of the things that is really remarkable about the deployment that Joe has is he's not in any one model. All right, Joe's actually spanning several different models of deployment, and he's utilizing the JSS to really do this in an intelligent and dynamic fashion, and it's pretty cool. So that's what we're going to have Joe talk about. I could probably keep going because I love the sound of my own voice, but I think you guys would rather listen to Joe right now. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Joe up, and we're going to talk about getting smart with your iPad deployment.
Thanks, Dusty, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to my session called Getting Smart with Your iPad Deployment. I hope you all know that I'm not actually going to make you guys smart, right? Because I'm not medically qualified to do that. But what I am going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I've been doing in my district to help me be successful with my deployment. So as Dusty said, my name is Joe Amada. I'm a mobile device admin at the North Shore School District. We are located in Bothell, Washington, which is about 15 miles northeast of Seattle, where this week it is like sunny and 70, or not 70, like 65, 68. You know, Dusty, when you said you wanted to make me feel at home, you didn't have to bring this weather here, because it's actually really nice in Seattle right now. So. Anyway, 15 miles northeast of Seattle, beautiful sunny Seattle, Washington. We're on the very north end of Lake Washington, which is why we're called North Shore. We're a K-12 district. We've got schools located in the cities of Kenmore, Bothell, and Woodinville, Washington. We've got 21 elementary schools, 7 junior highs, and 3 high schools. We've got a 4th one that's being built. We also have an additional alternative high school, an early childhood center, and a homeschool network. So total number of students is approximately 20,000 students. We've got approximately 8,000 OS X computers and approximately 300 iOS devices. We've also got a handful of Chromebooks, Kindles, and various Android devices. And I think we have 1 Surface RT and 1 Surface Pro. Yeah. So my job as a mobile device admin is I basically research and test and pilot and assist in the deployment of mobile devices in our district. I'm one of those 100,000 jobs that Chip was talking about in that keynote, so they've kind of created a job for me to research all that. All right, in the beginning, it all started out in April of 2012. And that's when I met Dusty. I took my CCA and CMA certification classes. Dusty was our instructor. He was our ninja master, our grand poobah, if you will. During my CMA class, he was really excited because the week prior to the class, Apple had released their first update to their Apple Configurator tool. That was version 1.0.1. He was really excited about it because version 1.0 was very buggy, and version 1.0.1 was less really buggy, but it was better than version 1.0. And this was a great tool to replace iPCU, which is the iPhone configuration utility. Apple Configurator had a lot of new features that iPCU didn't have, and so it was a welcome addition to the class, and something that, for those of you who haven't done iPad deployments before, Apple Configurator is definitely a tool that you will become more familiar with. It's an integral part of iOS deployments. So as far as research goes, following the CCA and CMA classes, I started doing my research as far as, excuse me, hitting up various blogs, forums, documentation, and YouTube videos. A year and a half ago, there really wasn't all that much out there as far as how are people doing deployments. I mean, iPads have only been around for, what, 3.5 years or so, and the idea of managing these and using them in an enterprise was still relatively new, and it's still even new, but now there are a few more resources. So I just went online, I started hitting up the blogs, participating in forums, downloading whatever documentation I could, just to kind of get as much knowledge as I could about what people were doing out there. I also did some site visits to school districts, both in my area, and then there were times when I was on vacation in certain parts of the country where if I heard about an iOS deployment that was there, I talked to my supervisor and said, hey, would it be all right if I stayed an extra day and hung out at some of the schools out there to kind of see what they're doing so I can kind of see firsthand what's going on. And what I saw, I learned that a lot of organizations focused on a single deployment workflow. Specifically, they would focus on a single ownership model. They would either have a personal ownership or an institutional ownership or a layered ownership. Those are the different ownership models that Apple offers. The personal one being most like the consumer experience where the end user owns the apps. The institutional ownership where the institution purchases and retains ownership of the apps. And then the layered, which is a combination of both of those. I also saw that a lot of the school districts would rely on a single tool for their deployment. They would choose either iTunes or Apple Configurator or an MDM. There was one school district that I went out to visit at the time last fall. They had 10,000 iPads and they were adding 3,000 more. And I thought, wow, if there's a district that has 10,000 iPads and they're adding a few thousand more, they must have like the golden answer. They must know exactly how to do this. And what I found out is that when I got to this school district, that all of their management was done per classroom using iTunes on a cart. So none of it was centrally managed. It was all kind of done by the end user. So I thought, wow, that's interesting. I also saw that there were some school districts that were using Apple Configurator exclusively. That was their tool of choice. That's what they wanted to use. So they chose that. And still, yet others were relying purely on an MDM to do all of their different tasks. I personally had a hard time imagining a large-scale deployment being locked into one single ownership model or one single tool for that. So I kind of had to ask myself, what ownership model should I choose when I do my deployment? Do I want to choose institutional or personal or layered? I thought, why limit us to just one? Why not instead go institutional and personal and layered? Depending upon the scenario or depending upon the deployment that I was going to do, choose the right ownership model for that particular deployment. Same thing for the tools. When I asked myself, do I want to use iTunes or Apple Configurator or an MDM? I thought, what? Why not use the right tool for the job? Use all three of them, iTunes and Apple Configurator and MDM. Now, before I go into my workflows, I just want to point out that what I'm doing in my school district is something that I've found that works for me. It's based upon our most recent deployment, which we did back in August. We pulled back all of our iPads that we had out there and then redeployed them. This was pre-iOS 7. The stuff that I am going to talk about today, you can use for either iOS 7 or iOS 6, either one. It's also based upon stuff I did with Casper 8.7, not version 9. But again, the stuff that I'm going through today will work in either one. So if you are currently using Casper version 8, things will apply there. And if you're using version 9, the things here will apply there as well. For those of you who are new to iOS management, I hope that you'll see a few different ways that you can deploy your iPads. And for those of you who have established iPad deployments, I hope that you'll be able to take something, maybe something you haven't seen before or something you haven't thought of before, be able to take that with you and sort of adapt it to work in your environment. iOS management is constantly evolving. It's constantly changing, and if I'm here at JNUC next year, it's likely that my workflow will change too. So just kind of take what you can, adapt, and do that for any of the sessions you go to here at JNUC. You know, take what you can and take it with you back to your environment, adapt it, and make it work for you. Does that sound too much like a proverb? You know, take what you can, make it work. It's like a Yoda phrase there. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and talk about the presentation agenda, getting smart. My objective basically was to use various deployment models and tools to accomplish the goals of the deployment. So I'm going to cover the three different deployment workflows that we are using and give examples of each. First, I'm going to give an example of something that follows the institutional ownership. That's our student carts that we have in our elementaries. Staff one-to-one that follows the layered ownership. We don't have a one-to-one for every teacher, but in our pilot last year, we had a select group of staffs that we did one-to-one. And then we're going to follow the personal ownership model for some of our special ed assistive tech devices. I'm also going to talk about the multiple tools that we use to accomplish our goals. That's iTunes, Apple Configurator, and Casper. The effective use of smart groups. I'm going to talk about how we use smart groups to be smart, so to speak, in automatically deploying configuration profiles and making certain apps available to specific groups of iPads. Time-saving variables. If you haven't used variables before or haven't explored them, they're really cool. And I'm going to show you an example of one configuration profile that we use to automatically set up mail and calendar for our teachers, where we use variables that pull information from the JSS into the mail account. All right, first things first. We first enrolled in Apple's volume purchase plan, which is called VPP. This is a program that Apple has that allows an institution to purchase multiple licenses of an app using a single Apple ID. It's actually more than one Apple ID because you have to have the program manager and program facilitator accounts. But basically, the district can have an app or a district-owned Apple ID and use that to purchase multiple licenses of a particular app. For education, you can save 50% off the cost of most apps when buying 20 codes or more in a single transaction. That part, a single transaction, is really important. If you put in an order for, let's say you're at a school and they all want one particular app, and they would say they want to have 25 copies of that app, so you go ahead and put in your order, and the next day 5 more teachers come up and say, oh, hey, I want that app also. When you put in that second order, you're not going to get it at that 50% off. So it's important to make sure you know how many you want, so that way you can get that purchase done where you get that 50% off. Also, that 20 code number is really important to know. If you have a teacher that says they want to have 15 copies of a particular license, it's actually cheaper to go out there and purchase the 20 codes because you'll get them at half off. You know, if you just purchase the 15, they will go at the full price. So basically, if you ever get a request for a VPP code purchase and they're asking for anywhere between 10 and 20 copies of that, just go ahead and purchase the 20 because it'll end up being cheaper than purchasing fewer than 20. And again, it has to be done in a single transaction. All right, and then the VPP codes, you get these Excel spreadsheets that give you codes. These codes can be distributed in a number of different ways. You can use Apple Configurator, you can use the JSS, you can use email. So there are a lot of different ways of doing this, and there are a lot of cool things that are going to be coming up with iOS 7 and future updates that I'm really excited to see. But again, VPP is going to play a big part in that. So for starters, the tools that we started off with, this is going to be kind of a real basic intro to how we started out. We started with a MacBook Pro. It was running 10.8, iTunes 11, Apple Configurator. At the time, we were using version 1.21. Version 1.3 was out and 1.31 were out, but there were some features that we liked about 1.21 that we liked better than 3. Now they're up to 1.4. Our JSS is at version 8.71. We still have it at 8.71. We've got a test server set up right now where we're playing around with 9.12. But back in August, we were using 8.71. And then another tool we needed was an iPad to build the Golden Master. Now, the Golden Master is similar to an image, but they're not the same. I mean, an image implies that it's an exact duplicate of a drive or a device that includes the operating system. In this case, that's not what we're doing here. The Golden Master, when I refer to it, is going to be an encrypted iTunes backup. And why encrypted? Well, the encrypted iTunes backup includes the iOS keychain, which includes the restrictions password, Wi-Fi password, and more. So if I accidentally say image throughout my presentation here, what I actually mean is an encrypted iTunes backup. And if I say Golden Master, that's what I'm referring to as that encrypted iTunes backup. So creating the Golden Master. So the first thing we did when we grabbed an iPad is we added and removed some of the apps from the dock. We customized some of the settings, and that included things like changing some of the accessibility features, changing some of the sounds and alerts, like turning off the keyboard clicks, setting default and mail and calendar settings. What we did is we asked around with some folks and said, hey, what are some of the tweaks that you did to your mail and calendar settings to make it nice for you? And so we kind of took those suggestions and put those in our Golden Master. Of course, the end user can go in there later on and change those if they want, but we wanted to have a nice group of settings in our Golden Master there. We added and removed some Safari bookmarks. And then with the clock app, we got rid of Cupertino and we put Seattle. We were just tired of everyone saying, what's Cupertino? Why do we care what the weather is in Cupertino? So we put Seattle and said, OK, that's probably mean a little bit more to you than Cupertino will. We then added a few apps. We didn't want to add too many apps to this. With the Golden Master, the larger you make that image, so to speak, the longer it's going to take to restore. So we just added a couple of apps that we wanted to make sure that everybody had. This included both free apps as well as paid apps. Now with paid apps and using iTunes to restore an encrypted iTunes backup, Apple allows you to redeem one app code and then retain the rest of them as proof of purchase. So in this case, we had two paid apps that we have on our Golden image. If we know exactly how many iPads we have in our district, or if we order, let's say we order 100 iPads, we know we can just purchase 100 VPP codes for that order and then use iTunes. We'll redeem one code when we download that into iTunes, and then when we restore that encrypted iTunes backup, we'll just retain the rest of those as proof of purchase. All right, then we go ahead and create the encrypted backup with iTunes. First thing we want to do is we want to disable automatic backups in iTunes. I'm sure you've seen if you plug an iPad or an other iOS device into iTunes, it'll try and automatically back that up. We wanted to prevent that from happening. So there's a defaults write command that you can run, open up terminal, run that, and that'll prevent iTunes from automatically backing up. Don't worry about copying that down. I'll go ahead and put that up on Jamf Nation in the session notes if you want to have that. And then we want to turn off automatic syncing. That's under iTunes Preferences and Devices. That's to prevent iPads from automatically syncing. We then run the backup. And we can, when you disable those automatic backups, you're still able to run manual backups. So we set a password, an encrypted iTunes password. Don't lose that password. We keep track of all of our passwords in a wiki. That's just been a good place for us to keep them secure in a place where we can access them later. So maybe that could help you guys out. And the backups are located in the local user directory under Library, Application Support, Mobile Device Backup. So if you're running a time machine backup or some sort of backup solution for your configurator station, you want to make sure that directory is being backed up so that way your Golden Master is also being backed up. OK, so now that we've enrolled in our VPP and we have a master image, so to speak, on our provisioning computer, we've got the foundation set for our deployment. So the arrival, that's always an exciting time. The UPS truck pulls up. He's coming down with these carts, these big boxes of 10 iPads apiece, and they come in. It's always a real exciting time. The first thing we do is we asset tag and we scan them into a spreadsheet. That picture there is of one of our tech assistants. He's a part-time college student that we have to do a lot of our OS 10 reimaging and doing our asset tagging and putting them into cases and stuff like that. And so what we do is on the boxes, when they come out of those 10 packs, there's a barcode that's on there that has the serial number of the device that's in there. We use a barcode scanner, scan that, it goes into an Excel spreadsheet. We then slap an asset tag, which also has a barcode on it. We scan that, so that way we've got serial number and asset barcode in our Excel spreadsheet. Later on, once we're done doing all that, we go ahead and upload that into Web Help Desk, which is what we use for our ticketing system, as well as our asset management. So that could be a fast way to get that information in if you haven't used the scanner before. That's what's been working for us. We then add a case. We've got two different standard cases that we use. We've got a bunch of others, but these are our two standards. I'll go into details a little later on, but there's one that we use by Cyber Acoustics, and then there's another one that we use by Griffin. It's their survivor case. Once we asset tag them and have a case on them, we go ahead and restore the master with iTunes. And this can be done with a cart, a sync cart, or an Anthro sync cart, or a Datamation, or a lock-in charge unit. There are a lot of different syncing devices out there. Now, I personally, at my desk, I'm using a real sophisticated, state-of-the-art, highly advanced system that looks like this. It's a 10-port powered USB hub and a $10 dish rack from Target. Here it is in use, right there. It actually works out quite nice. The hub is kind of hiding underneath the dish rack there. And you see those little metal bars on the side where you're supposed to hang cups? That's not a place to hang cups. That's cable management. You've got them right there. It works out really nice. I mean, the guy who invented this back in the 90s or 80s, maybe even, he was a true visionary because he probably had no idea that he was going to be building a tablet syncing solution. So that's what works for us. I know it's inexpensive. It works. Maybe I should patent it. We can go into business, maybe, Dusty? Create these guys. Anyway, that's what I'm using just right at my desk. We've got the other devices. We've got sync trays and sync carts and stuff like that. But that's what I use at my desk because I don't need to charge them. This only does syncing, but that's what works for me. So all of our iPads that come in go through this sort of imaging process. They get asset tagged, they go into a case, they get this golden master restored onto them, and then we pop them right back into the box, pop them on a shelf, and then we know this whole shelf has kind of a group of pads that are ready to go on to the next step for one of our workflows that we have. So I'm going to start with our student carts, which follows Apple's institutional ownership model. So we start with the prep work. We have a dedicated OS X station for Apple Configurator. In some cases, we've got a single computer on a cart. In other cases, we've got a computer in a particular building where there are multiple carts that are using that. There's one place where we have a station that's actually it's more like a kiosk that a lot of users log on to. And we didn't want just anyone to launch Apple Configurator and start playing around with it. So what we did in those cases is we've got a local user setup called iPad admin. And what we did is we just set the permissions so that the user iPad admin is the owner of the Apple Configurator app. And we set the permissions as 700 so that way no other users could launch it. We then, whoops. I'm sorry. Hold on a second. OK. Then we want to go ahead and set up a generic district Apple ID for the configurator computer. So this could be one that you designate for that specific computer to provision your iPads. You then want to authorize iTunes with that new Apple ID that you just created. And then finally, you want to make sure that you use the same Apple ID in Apple Configurator that you used in iTunes. This is very important. And when I was first starting out, and also as I've talked to other school districts, I found that sometimes people would enter a different Apple ID when they would authorize iTunes and have a different one in Apple Configurator, and they would get an app not authorized error message. So to prevent that, you just want to make sure that you've got the same Apple ID authorized in iTunes as you do when you set up Configurator. All right, next, going into the JSS to create the enrollment profile. In Casper 8, this is located in Management, Mobile Device Enrollment, Create Enrollment Profile. In Casper 9, it's under Enrollment Profiles, and you click on the plus sign. You want to give it a name. You want to choose some sort of a standard that you want to use with the naming convention. So in our case, we usually start off with like the school name, and then if it's a cart, we type iCart, and then either a room number or a wing or a library, something like that. But similar to the passwords that we have set up, we use our wiki to kind of keep track of these standards, and that just helps to keep things organized when you start getting 10 or 15 or 20 or more enrollment profiles out there. For location information also, you want to go ahead and use standards for those. So when you're creating your enrollment profile, what we did for our student carts is under position, we typed the word student because we wanted all of our carts to be set up as student devices. Then for department, we set up grade levels. So we had grade 0, 1, 0, 2, all the way up through grade 12. And those can be set up under settings and department. And in Casper 9, it's under management settings, network organization departments. This is nice to be able to set those up in advance, because then it gives you a nice drop down that you can go and select your grade number. And it keeps things consistent. Again, if you're going to scope a smart group to a particular piece of criteria, things like department, having those grade levels is nice, because they're all consistent there. Then for room, for the carts, as I explained earlier, we either choose a wing or a room number or library. So the first example there, iCart 200, that would be an example of a cart that we have in the 200 wing of a building that might be shared amongst several rooms. If we had multiple carts in a wing, we might call it iCart 200A, iCart 200B, things like that. The second example, iCart 304, is like a cart that we have that belongs to room 304. And iCart library is one that, a cart that would live in the library. And then buildings. The school or building, this can be set up in settings and buildings. It's really important, at least if what we did, is because we're doing, I'll show you it a little bit later on, where we have end users, staff members enrolling over the air. We wanted to make sure that the buildings that we set up in the JSS is the same as what we have coming out of our LDAP server. We want those to match up, so that way if we ever scope by location, we'll get the right answers. We don't want to have any inconsistencies there between what we have coming out of our LDAP server versus what we have in the JSS. So when you do set up your building or school names under that building category, go ahead and be sure that it's the same as what you have in your LDAP server. And so this is kind of what it looks like. Again, this is in Casper version 8.7. For the display name, we had ER iCart 6. Target iOS is iOS 6. For the description, we thought this would be a good deterrent for folks, because currently there's not a way to prevent an end user from deleting that MDM enrollment profile out of their iPad. So we kind of put some words of wisdom, I guess. Don't remove this profile. Removing this profile may delete apps, data, and other critical iPad settings. If removed, we will not be able to restore or recover your data. We thought that's fair warning, I guess. And then again, these are the fields that I was talking about. For position, we put student. For department, we put grade one, and building, we put our building number. In this case, this was Eastridge Elementary. And then for room, we put iCart 6. So this is a cart that we have in room 6. Now, the nice thing about using these fields is that these are all settings that the end user cannot change. So when I was first starting out and thinking about somehow utilizing smart groups, I thought, is there like a naming convention that I could use for the device name, like maybe putting school code and then iCard and then room number and device number. The thing is that an end user can easily go in, change the name of the device, and then it may fall out of that smart group. By putting things in here into the mobile device enrollment profile and then installing that onto the iPads, you can prevent the end user from changing any of these things. So these things will remain consistent throughout your devices and will make smart groups a lot more accurate. So once we go ahead and save that enrollment profile, I'll show you where we download that here in just a second. But before that, I wanted to create a JSS smart group here. We're going to create a real simple one called all student iPads. And in version 8.7, this is under management, smart mobile device groups, create. And under version 9.1, it's mobile devices, smart mobile device groups. And then click the plus sign. Next to location, you click the plus sign. And you'll notice that the options will match the fields that you used when you were creating that enrollment profile. If you look over on the right side there where it shows the search items, it's got username, real name, email address, department, building, room, phone, position. Those are the same fields that we saw when we were creating that enrollment profile. So in order to create one for all students, we just clicked on position and we entered the text to say position is student. So again, it's based on just one piece of criteria. You can become more granular later on, but for this example, I'm just going to show one. And yeah, so then you go ahead and save that. So now that we've got a smart group created for students, we know that anytime that enrollment profile is installed on a station with student in the position field, it'll automatically go into that smart group called all student iPads. So configuration profile. So I'm just going to show you a simple configuration profile that you may want to set up for all of your students. There may be some restrictions you want to set, like no Siri profanity or no in-app purchases. There are dozens of different check boxes that you can check or uncheck to whatever you want to have. Web clips. I'm a big fan of web clips. I love using them. There's only one that we put onto all of our devices, and that's one that points to a website that we have information about iPad support. We've got a link to our knowledge base. We've got a link to our ticketing system if someone wants to put in a ticket. It links to the iPad user guide, things like that. It's also nice because with web clips, there's a box you can check to prevent that web clip from being deleted from that iPad. So you know how when you press and hold down on your iPad and some of the apps that come as a default on your iPad, you're not able to delete those? You can set a web clip to do that as well. So something like an iPad support web clip is one that I don't want anyone to delete. So I go ahead and make that one that is permanent on there, is one that's not able to be deleted. We also use web clips to point to web-based subscription services. I'm sure there are a lot of services that you guys use in education where you've got a subscription to, and teachers would have to tell a student to go to a particular URL and log in, and it might take some time for them to do that. So what I like to do is, not on all devices, but I like to create a whole bunch of different web clips and put them up in self-service and then scope them to various groups and tell teachers, hey, if you want to have a particular web clip, go ahead and tell your kids to go to self-service and download that configuration profile, and that'll pop those particular subscription services icons right over to your iPad. Let's see here. Oh, okay, and you can also set them to go full screen. That's a cool thing too, because it opens up as a full screen. It doesn't necessarily open up in Safari, and full screen really makes it look like an app. It doesn't look like they're going to a particular website. Now, I did have some issues when I was playing around with it, trying out the different websites, so you'll want to test it out to make sure it works with full screen before you checkmark that option. Also, I heard that with iOS 7, that links to the App Store don't work in a full screen web clip. And I heard that it's not a bug, but that it's a security setting in the new iOS. It's a feature, right? All right, let's see here. Then you go ahead and scope that to the All Student iPad Smart Group. And so now, as long as we scope it to that, any device that has the word student in the position field will automatically go to the All Student iPad group, and thus this configuration profile will automatically install. So let's see it all in action here. So we go to the deployment, we download that enrollment profile, and we import that into Configurator. This comes down as a .mobile config file. You can import that into Configurator. You then use Apple Configurator to install the enrollment profile on all your iPads in the cart or dish rack or whatever you might be using. Once the enrollment profile is installed, then all the iPads in the cart are automatically enrolled in the JSS and have that location settings set up. So that spot where we had position as student, that's now in the JSS. And because of that, and because we scoped this particular configuration profile to that all student group, those restrictions and those web clips will automatically be deployed out to all those iPads. And the nice thing is if we have let's say we have another cart that we want to introduce to the same school, we can create another enrollment profile, download that, install that, and as long as we have student in that location field, all future iPads that get enrolled will automatically fall into that all student group and will automatically get all these settings too. So a lot of this is you get your settings set up beforehand. It takes a lot of work to get it fine-tuned, but once you get that system set up, anything you do in the future will automatically get all these things. So it's something that you can scale to a much larger deployment. All right, so our student carts is just one scenario where we utilize the power of the JSS and smart groups to dynamically distribute settings through the use of configuration profiles to our fleet of iPads. Next, I'm going to talk about our staff one-to-one that follows our layered ownership model. So as I talked to you before, I mentioned that we have our LDAP server set up. We have a connection set up there, and that's under Settings, LDAP Server Connections. And in Casper 9, it's under System Settings and LDAP Servers. And we do this so that all staff can enroll their district-issued iPads into the JSS using their district email address and passwords. You can then map different fields there. You can, the only ones we map are username, real name, email address, position, and building. We leave the phone, room, and department blank. And as I mentioned before, you want to make sure that you match up the building name from the LDAP, from LDAP into the JSS again, so that way if you have to scope by a particular, if you want to scope by a particular building, then that will all be consistent. And then one thing I wanted to do is I wanted to create a configuration profile, as I mentioned before, to set up email and calendar for all of my staff members. And so I wanted to create a smart group that's simply called has email, because that email field is only being filled by users who are enrolling over the air. I know that, that I'll want these settings set up on their devices here. So I created this smart group called has email, and the criteria for email address, I had it say email address is not blank. So it's is not nothing. That double negative, would make a positive. So basically, if there's something in that email address field, then it should fall into the group has email. And then this will give us, like I said, a group of all of our iPads that have email addresses there. So next, I'm going to create a configuration profile to set up mail and calendar. You can use a configuration profile to set up IMAP settings, CalDev settings, Exchange settings. We're using Zimbra, which is an open source email and calendaring system. And we're able to set up Zimbra using Microsoft Exchange settings. So in the JSS, we go to create a configuration profile and select Exchange Active Sync. Now here's one of my favorite smart things to do. It's using those variables that I was telling you about, time-saving variables. You can use variables to auto-populate fields from the JSS into the configuration profile. So next to account name, I put $real name. Next to user, I put $username. Next to email address, I put $email. And then we scope that configuration profile to the smart group has email. And it looks kind of like this. You can see real name there. For Exchange ActiveSync host and domain, we have our mail server listed there. For user, we put $username, email address, $email. Then we leave the password blank there. Now, basically, what we're doing here is when the user enrolls into the JSS, it pulls that information from our LDAP server so that real name shows their actual real name. Username will show their username as it is in our LDAP server. And then email address is their email address. So we go ahead and save that. And we scope it to the has email group and then save it. So next, we'd want to set up the ODA enrollment. In 8.7, it's under Settings, Mobile Device Management Framework Settings, Enrollment Process tab. In 9, it's under Management Settings, User-Initiated Enrollment. You can then enter information about the login page title, like please log in with your district email address and password. For MDM profile, I add some verbiage similar to the one I did in the student one. Don't delete this profile because you might lose your apps data and other critical settings. We then create a QR code that points to the enrollment URL. And if you haven't used QR codes before, especially with iOS devices, they're really handy. And I'll show you how we use those later on. You can use you can just do a search for a QR code generator online and get a QR code that points to the enrollment URL. So now that let's see how it all works together in our deployment. First thing we do is we have an orientation for our staff one-to-one. We schedule orientation trainings where staff get their iPads. We give them an iPad with our base golden image on it. And the first thing we do before we enroll is we help them create an Apple ID using their district email address, and we don't tie it to a credit card account. Now that process takes a long time, as I'm sure many of you know. We've done it several times. One time we had a group of about 40 people just this last summer, and we were kind of leading the class through creating their own Apple IDs. And some folks went through the first page pretty fast, and they waited for the rest of us to kind of catch up. And we actually encountered a sort of a timeout issue that happened that we hadn't experienced before. And so they weren't able to get back in to finish their application. They couldn't have it email them their password because it said the Apple ID didn't exist. They would go to create a new Apple ID. It said the Apple ID did exist. So it was a phone call to Apple, say, hey, there are a whole bunch of these accounts. Anyway, we eventually got it figured out. But the following class that we had, where we had about 30 or so people, we said, OK, we're going to go through this. We're going to go through it pretty quick. And for those of you who get stuck, just wait, and we'll come to you later on. And that was a lot more effective. So just know that there is a timeout issue that can happen. We've also considered using the batch Apple ID creator, which is a script that's posted on enterpriseios.com. That might be better for creating Apple IDs for students. We haven't actually used it, but we've heard really good things about it. But that's another possibility of things we can explore. All right, so help set, OK, there we go. OK, then what we do is we go ahead and post the QR code to the enrollment page. We use a QR code scanning app, which is on our golden our golden master that we have. And we just pop the QR code up on the screen, so that way our end users just pick up their iPads, snap a picture of it, and it takes them right to the enrollment page. This does two things. One, it ensures that they get to the right page, but it also teaches teachers how to use QR codes. Because I've seen some teachers do some really cool things with QR codes in their classrooms, where they post new QR codes in the morning and the kids go up and scan it and it takes them to their lessons for the day and things like that. We use that in our initial training. We then lead the class through installing the CA certificate and the enrollment profile. And once the device is enrolled, that configuration profile for mail that is scoped to has email automatically installs. So when they go ahead and launch their mail app, like I said, previously we had that username, email address, and location information. So all of that gets pulled into that configuration profile. So when they launch their mail app, all their information is already in there. All they have to do is type in their password. Once they do that, their mail syncs up, their calendar is all synced up, the contacts all sync up. So it's just a nice way to keep everything consistent, saves time, it ensures consistency. If any of you have ever led users through setting up mail and those steps, it can take quite a bit of time. Doing it this way is a lot faster. And again, you set it up once and it's set up forever. It'll be easy for users to enroll. And then if there are any apps that are scoped, users can go to self-service and see the apps that are available to him or her. Payload variables are fantastic time savers, as I showed you in the example here. You can set up all different kinds of things like, as I was showing you, the mail setup, CalDev connections, Exchange Active Sync that can be used to set up VPN connections, all kinds of things. Here's a list of some of the variables that are available for you to use in Casper 9. Most of these are the same as what they had in Casper 7, or Casper 8, sorry. But there are some new ones there. I'm really excited to play around with the extension attribute one. I don't know exactly how I'll use that yet, but I'm excited to see that option available. So that's our staff one-to-one workflow. Next, I'm going to go over our workflow for special ed assistive tech devices, which follows Apple's personal ownership model. The personal ownership is by far the easiest to do. Like I said, it's a one-to-one personal. We basically create an enrollment profile in the JSS. We set position to be assistive technology. We install that enrollment profile via Apple Configurator. It's more for inventory purposes. And then after that, there's no other management that's done by us. The special ed department kind of takes over from there. They've got their own Apple IDs and their own process they do. So in reality, it's more of a layered ownership, but from an IT standpoint, it's personal ownership because we kind of set it up and then we give it to them. They take care of all the app installations, all the management from that point on. All right, so as you can see from the examples that I had here, the smart groups are a great way to, again, be smart with your deployment. Along with configuration profiles and apps, we also use smart groups in the mobile device ebook catalog to scope PDF files to groups of iPads. The first thing you can do is set up a web server location to host the PDF files. And in Casper 8, that's under Management, Mobile Device Ebook Catalog, Add eBooks, Add Manually. Or in Casper 9, it's under eBook, hit the plus sign, and they call it in-house eBooks. You can then give the PDF a name, enter the URL to the location of the PDF on the web server, upload an icon, and then scope it to the appropriate group. And just some examples here are things like acceptable use policy. That's a PDF that we want to have on all devices. So you can just scope it to everybody. And it's nice to just tell users, hey, if you ever need to refer to the acceptable use policy, go to self-service, go to the ebook catalog. You'll have it there. Maybe something like graduation information, you could scope it to a smart group called all grade 12 folks. Again, that's just a way to ensure that all seniors will have that information with them. Emergency phone list, like in our tech department, we've got escalation procedures, like if a server goes down or something, we have the name of the person to call, their home phone, their office phone, cell phone, and then if you can't get a hold of someone in 5 minutes, you call the next person on the list. And sure, we've got that information in our wiki, but rather than having people log into the wiki and navigate to that page, we just have a PDF that's scoped to folks in the tech department. And we're able to find that because position is another one of those fields that we have that's pulled from LDAP into the JSS. We can create a smart group that looks for certain tags for the job positions that we have in technology, and then we know that everyone's got those escalation procedures on their iPads. And if there are any new employees that come in, they go ahead and enroll over the air. Because their position is one that's in the tech department, they'll automatically get those settings. So it's not like we have to remember, oh, do we have to add him to this group? Do we have to add him to that group? It just makes it real easy for things to happen dynamically. Again, you set it up once at the beginning, and then everything happens seamlessly afterwards. Again, something you can scale from something small to something large. All right, so all the things I've been talking about today are some things that we are doing now. So what are we going to do different next time? Tweaks for future deployments. There's iOS 7 and Casper 9. There's some really cool things coming out. These are some things that Apple has publicly announced. They've talked a little bit about App Store license management, seamless MDM enrollment, and single sign-on. Details of those, I think, are still under NDA, so we can't really go into details, but there's some really cool things coming that I'm really excited about. Apple TV management, that has already started with Casper 9, and we've got some Apple TVs in our environment, so we're looking forward to taking advantage of that and looking forward to any future things that come about. Caching Server 2 is something else that I'm also really interested in. Continue to share ideas with other districts. I came to JNUC last year, and that was my first JNUC that I attended, and the sessions were great, but the networking there was fantastic. Being able to talk to other people who are doing the same things that I'm doing and saying, hey, what are you guys doing? What are some of the problems you're coming up with? How are you able to resolve those issues? And just being able to share that. And as I explained before, these workflows are just what I've been doing, and it works for me, but there is no one right answer. There's no one golden workflow that's going to work for everybody. We're all kind of writing the book, so to speak, with each deployment that we do. So continuing to share with other districts about what's been working, what hasn't been working. And I want to continue doing that. And I'll be doing a lot of that here at JNUC this week. So another discussion that often comes up with school district iPad admins is regarding the technical gear that we use, the carts, the towers. Cases are also a real popular one. It's like, what cases are you using? Just so that way you don't have this happen to them. This was an iPad that we used in our drop tests, and this is a case that we will not be using. So what are we using? For iPad cases, I explained before, it's a CyberAcoustics IC300BK case. That's kind of our standard for our everyday iPads. It's a portfolio type case that's really thin, and we're able to fit it into a lot of different carts. It also has rubber corners to prevent damage from the edges, and that's where we found most of our damage is happening on the edges. So this one had like a rubber edge, and it did quite well in our drop tests. I don't encourage you guys to do it. I've already done it, so it's a good case. At least we found it. We also use the Griffin Survivor case, which we use in some of our classrooms for our younger kids or in classrooms where they may need a little additional protection on their iPads. As far as carts go, we have Bretford PowerSync carts. We've got Anthro tablet charging carts. Anthro did just come out with a new cart recently that does both charging and syncing, so we're probably going to be taking a look at those. We really like the Anthro products. And then as far as some of the towers we've got a Griffin multi-dock that we use that does both syncing and charging. And we also have an Anthro tablet charging cabinet that does just charging there. That along with my dish rack, but I'm the only one who has the dish rack system in our district at least. So, all right, almost done. K-12 iPads and Education Morning Coffee Talk. This is one of those mini sessions that I had last year. And last year they didn't have the mini sessions sign up online. They just had a little whiteboard. And so last year on Wednesday afternoon, I just kind of wrote up, hey, K-12 iPad admins, let's meet for coffee tomorrow morning. And about 25 people showed up. It was really cool. Like, again, talking about that networking, talking about us all talking to each other about what we're doing and stuff. So I thought, why not do it again? And so I posted a mini session. That's going to be Thursday morning, 8 a.m. Online, I posted that we would do it in the fourth floor lobby in the back where the couches are, but this year they've got the vendors set up, or the sponsors set up there. So instead, I'm going to go ahead and go in there and edit that. We're going to do it on the fifth floor because it looks like they have couches there. So if you guys are available Thursday morning, 8 a.m., grab a cup of coffee and head on up to the fifth floor. Couches, we'll just be there hanging out. It's going to be a real informal hang where we can just meet each other and we can all kind of discuss things that we're doing and what's working and what's not working. I'm not going to lead any sort of discussion. I might, but probably not. But it'll be a great chance for you to meet others that are doing iPad administration. Also tomorrow at 1 p.m., deploying iOS 7 in an institutional model. Andy Beaver is doing this presentation. It's going to focus on iOS 7 and Casper 9 and really focus on an institutional model. So that'll be a great session for you guys to attend. All right, so we've got a few minutes left here. Does anyone have any questions you guys can think of?
Probably don't have a lot of time to discuss this now, but in any of your deployment scenarios, have you had the iPads gone home, and have you delved into the filtering aspect and found one that's satisfactory?
Not yet. All of our student ones are currently staying on campus. Our staff members are taking them home, but no, we haven't. But that is something we are researching. And hopefully we'll find a good solution for that. What's that, a session tomorrow? Okay. Andy says there's a session tomorrow that's going to cover that. What time is it? You know what time it is? We're good?
You got 10 minutes.
Okay.
So I understand why you're doing the iTunes sync because of the encrypted backups, but what is the process now? I haven't done that in a while because I'm pretty much configurator bound. But so do you have to still click on every one and sync each one?
That's a good question. So a lot of people have asked me that in the past too. It's like, well, do you have to do one at a time kind of a thing? iTunes will actually restore the backup to multiple ones at once, but you do have to start each one. So like when I pop them into my dish rack there, I do have to start each one, but I can image 10 of them in less than 10 minutes. Just have to plug the first one in, click start, plug the second one, click start. But they're installing simultaneously. They are going through.
And then one other thing, if you're using configurator, one thing that I do is I put a web clip on them that it's locked, that they cannot remove, that sort of reinforces their group, so that even if they unenroll the device, I still have a record of that device in the smart group because I'm actually scoping to that enrollment profile that's locked to the device.
Gotcha. Cool.
So as long as you're using configurator anyway, that's just an extra security piece I put on there.
Cool.
When you're talking about iPad cases and other third-party products, just as somebody who wears another hat, I'm also an Apple dealer, an Apple specialist.
Okay.
I'd encourage the K-12 people in here to partner with Apple dealers and Apple specialists in particular for those sorts of things, because they'll do stuff like where we've gone into school districts and we'll offer them special discounts, and we'll even kick that money back to the schools as well.
Cool.
And also to offer things like accidental damage insurance for the parents, because that happens a lot, and then the parent ends up being liable. Well, you can prevent that for a very low cost.
Cool. And there are a lot of different options there too. I've visited some school districts that are signed up to various insurance programs like that. Some school districts self-insure, where they'll have each student pay a certain dollar amount, and then per incident they pay like a deductible, so to speak, and then if they've broken or lost more than 2, then they're out of luck. And there are a lot of different ways of doing it, but insurance policy is important. Again, we don't have them going home yet, but when we do, we'll definitely have to address that.
Do you use a supervised model at all on the in configurator?
For the most part, no. We do have some classrooms using Casper Focus, and we wanted them to take full advantage of that. So we are supervising those that are in those situations, and the teachers that have been using it love it. And a lot of the new things with supervised devices that are coming out now and with Configurator 1.4 are a lot better than they were with previous versions. So we'll probably look into doing that some more.
We found when we do 40 to 60 at a time, enrolling them into the JSS is much faster with a backed up, image from configurator and supervised. So just wondering if you were doing anything like that.
Yeah, the thing is we really wanted to get that restrictions password to hold, and as far as my most recent test, that restrictions password wouldn't hold when you were doing a supervised a supervised Apple configurator restore, so to speak. Yeah, the only way, as far as I know, to retain that restrictions passcode is to do an encrypted iTunes backup and restoring that. So that was one of our primary reasons for choosing that as a method to sort of set our image on that. So if Apple can figure out a way to retain that, it'll be a great option to be able to use Apple Configurator to do that. Yeah.
We haven't used configuration profiles in a while, but we have a smaller environment of iPads we have to manage. Have you had issues with moving up to iOS 7 with your student iPads and then your configuration profile breaking?
So currently, we have not updated to iOS 7 on our cards, and actually we've told our staff don't upgrade. We put a DNS block so that way they wouldn't be able to update, and because all of our iPads right now they're in a very controlled environment, we've been able to prevent them from updating. So no, we haven't run into that. I've read online about a lot of issues that people have been running into with that, and for now we're kind of holding steady with iOS 6.13.
So it's institution-wide then? It's staff and students can't?
Yeah, so far. Oh. We have a question down the front here.
So you, all your end users enroll themselves? Is that right?
So all of our staff members enroll themselves. All the students, currently we've got them in carts.
Yep.
Some of the classrooms do sort of have a one-to-one where every kid uses the same iPad, but they don't take them home. And those carts are all done through an enrollment profile with configurator, so they're not enrolling over the air.
So so when you move to Casper 9, if you were to this is just something I'm thinking of doing. If you were not to do the upgrade, if you were to actually, imagine you went to a brand new, clean JSS.
Okay.
Would you have everybody, would you maybe even have the students? I'm thinking about potentially having the students enroll themselves. Like everybody just
They can, sure.
enroll.
Yeah, and the advantage of that is you could capture student information into the JSS, which would definitely be a nice option, especially if they're using email or whatnot. You can have all that information in there. So if we were going to start clean, depending on how we wanted our students to use it, we may consider that. And maybe it'll be something that we would divide up between secondary schools and elementary schools. Maybe with the elementaries, and we might have them just use the cart iPads, and then for secondary schools, we could have them enroll over the air and get more information from them. Yeah.
All our students enroll themselves, grade 4 to grade 9. It works pretty good with iOS 7 and Casper 9. We got a real problem because they turn on Find My iPad and they don't know their password.
Yeah.
You're pooched. You've got
I've read
brick
about that.
for an iPad.
Yeah.
Just gonna grab that one real quick. All right, so are you referring to activation lock? Activation lock? Okay. Yeah, so just real quick, jump up on that one. Who's run into that so far with activation lock? All right. There's a lot of information coming out about this. Just keep watching for changes. Like anything with iOS 7, I think this is, 32 months old for MDM in general. And iOS 7, we're seeing things are still kind of coming out here. One of the things that we've seen, supervision. So if you have devices that are supervised ahead of time, they can still turn on Find My iPhone, Find My iPad, whichever type of device it is. But the association between that Apple ID and the UDID of that device isn't made. So regardless of them turning that feature on, you'll still be able to kind of reclaim that device.
But then you have the issue of what supervised mode. You can't do a layered model with supervised mode.
We can talk about that a little more. That's probably going to be a Thursday morning conversation. There's a lot of implications there, but yeah, there's some differences, and again, a lot of this stuff is going to be changing in the next couple months without going too far into it. So, and Andy, I think, is going to talk a little bit about some of that as well tomorrow. I know we've had conversations about that, so yeah, just wanted to grab that one real quick. So.
How much time do we have?
2 minutes.
Okay. Maybe one more question then.
So Joe, how do you deal with like asset tracking? Say like an iPad walks off. How are you dealing with that currently?
Well, we haven't had any walk-off yet. I don't know. Does anyone else out here have any suggestions for that with iPads that have walked off? Any way of tracking it? I mean, aside from gathering IP address information, I mean, that'd be one thing we could do.
With iOS 7, discuss that with, as far as being able to restore it to factory. You can't actually use the device if they have Find My iPhone on, so it becomes useless. So if people know that, that's a way to deter that.
Right.
We've had that quite a bit happen at our high school where somebody's stolen it and try to find out if that is completely worthless.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've been able to, with our OS 10 stations, just gather some general information about, a stolen device, whether it's IP address, where it's, you can find out where it's checking in from, and oftentimes police can get a subpoena to or they can get the ISP to kind of give up information about it if they are sure it's a stolen device and they're able to get it back. So, I mean, we've had some success with that with our OS 10 stations, but fortunately, we haven't had to deal with that yet with our iOS devices. So hopefully we won't have to, but I'm sure inevitably, especially once they start going off campus, we'll have to figure out a solution there.
It's on site to whatever access point is checked. I mean, I had that situation and was checking in with a specific access point. We found the room it was in. Where it was.
Oh, cool. Cool. Awesome. All right, well, hope you guys can make it to the morning coffee session. Again, on Thursday, it's 8 a.m. We'll be on the 5th floor. Thanks again for coming.